morning is Susan Armstrong. Susan, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm just excited about having you. It's been 7 years since the last time we talked, and at that time we were talking about your book, Invisible Prison,
Yep.
a true story of revival. Can you give me a 3 to 5 minute background so that everybody knows kind of where you came from?
Yes, sure. The book, it was called An Invisible Prison, and it was the story of my life, really, written as a novel. But I spent 20 years living on the street, so homeless, addicted, abused. I ended up property of a motorcycle gang, not the nice kind, the FBI most wanted kind. I've been shot and stabbed, left on the side of the road for dead. And then when I finally escaped from the gang, I didn't have them to abuse me anymore. And when I looked in the mirror, all I could see were all the horrible things that I had done in my life. And I could see no future for myself. And I hated myself so much that I spent 2 years trying to commit suicide. And as if I needed more proof of my worthlessness, obviously that didn't work either. So I was an absolute mess. And when I wrote that book, I wrote it because I wanted people to understand the emotion, that the psychology, if you will, that drove me to come from a nice, normal, middle-class family. I had two parents, but how I ended up where I did, starting where I was.
Okay, but outside of that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play? And I guess I'm joking a little bit because I don't want to go back to where I was 7 years ago when I first heard your story, because it is so heart-wrenching to think of what can happen to an individual.
Oh,
and
WL, you know what, even when I think about it now, and I think about that young girl, that 8, 9 year old girl who tried so hard, to please everyone, to be all things to all people all the time, so terrified that if she did anything wrong, that, she was going to get sent back where she came from. I don't know what I was afraid of. But when I think about that, it feels like a completely different person in a completely different life, even though I know it wasn't. But it's heartbreaking for me to think about.
I think that's good though, Susan, don't you? Because it all happened. It is all very real. But if you can kind of separate yourself from that, it makes it easier going forward.
Yes. And obviously I have. One of the things that I had to do was I had to rewire my brain. So
Okay.
when I sobered up and came out of that, I really had to look at what were the beliefs that got me where I was, because I knew that I had a hand in this. And so I took a long time and I looked at all of the beliefs that had gotten me where I was. And then I worked to rewire those beliefs. So to recreate new beliefs, to create new neural pathways. And so that's what actually the second book is about.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about that. Just before we do that, I do want to point out that the experts are telling us that we only use about 5% of our brain.
Yeah.
The other 95% is subconscious, and the subconscious has recorded everything that we've seen and done, everything that's been done to us, said to us. And for most of us, there's a lot of negative stuff, a lot of hurt that's there in our subconscious, and that is standing in the way, directly in the way from progress that we want to make, improvement that we want to make in our life, improvement in our finances, but even more importantly, our health.
Mm-hmm.
And so you nailed it on the head when you said you have to change those programs, because you aren't that girl that you used to be.
No.
So now your new book is Confidence for Life, 9 Secrets to Setting Yourself Free.
Yep, it is. And you're right when you say that. Abraham Maslow has a great quote that everything in your life, so everything anybody ever says to you or does to you, imprints itself on your unconscious mind. And that's the problem. The challenge is we're programmed by people outside of ourselves before we even have the capacity of rational thought, because that neocortex that we worship so much, that reasoning and decision making and the ability for language, that's not fully formed when we're born. And
No.
so all of those messages that we get, whether they're spoken or unspoken, but all of those messages, they imprint in our subconscious, and they have the power to guide our life, to guide our choices, to guide our behavior. The problem is we're not consciously aware that it's happening. And then one day we go, how did I get here? How did my life end up like this? It's that subconscious programming.
Okay, so an example of that might be I'm on my way to a job interview, and this is my dream of a lifetime job, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and another applicant walks out of the interview that he was in, and he looks better dressed, more poised, more self-confident, and the thought that hits me immediately is, what am I doing here? Who do you think you are? You know you're not qualified for this.
Yep.
That's the subconscious, right?
That is it exactly. And that's
okay.
I always talk about that. I always say we talk ourselves out of things before we even start.
Right.
And then we wonder why we're stuck.
Yes. Yes. Hey, I flunked English. How could I ever write a book?
Hey, you and me both. English was not my favorite subject, and yet I've written 3 books. So, but you're right. It's the unconscious programming, and it's our self-doubt. We're wired towards the negative, and there's a thing called confirmation bias. So, and this is so important because confirmation bias can be a very dangerous thing. Confirmation bias means that you will find proof of what you believe to be true. So to your point, if you believe that you're worthless, and now I'm actually talking about myself and my lifelong battle, if you believe that you're worthless, as you go through the day, the only thing you're going to notice are all of those things that you do wrong, or all of the negative things that happen, or the negative looks people give you, or the negative comments they make. Those are the only things you're going to notice, because confirmation bias dictates you will always find proof of what you believe to be true.
Right. Okay.
That's powerful, both positively and negatively.
It is. And let me say to the viewers, you are looking right now at 2 very successful people. Okay. I was raised in an alcoholic's home.
Yeah.
Abused, beaten, left home when I was 15 to get out of it. Okay. Nothing anywhere near the abuse and the things that happened to you when you were a young girl. Okay. Now, we both have overcome and had to overcome a lot of negative programming.
Yeah.
Okay. So what woke you up? Or they talk about it as an aha moment. What was that defining moment that you decided, I'm going to stop trying to kill myself and change?
Well, there's actually 2, if you will. So I woke up one morning, and it had been a particularly bad day the day before. The last thing I remember the day before was taking another case of beer from a taxi driver. So I don't remember much. I do remember that I had called and quit my job. I had said, I told my district manager that I worked in a ladies' clothing store, minimum wage. I called my manager and said, my district manager, and said, you know what, I'm a horrible person. You deserve somebody better. And I had quit my job. I woke up the next morning. I opened a beer. I took 2 sips of that beer. And the thought occurred to me that I was going to die. If I continued the way I was going to die in a gutter somewhere. And that was okay, because that's what everybody expected. And then I thought, well, I could try and fix my life. And just exactly what we were talking about. The thought came in my mind, oh yeah, but you're so worthless. Nobody's going to accept you. They're going to throw rotten fruit at you. You're probably going to die, even if you try and fix your life, because nobody will accept you. So knowing I was going to die either way, I decided to die fighting. So that was the first one. And that's how I ended up in rehab. And the second defining moment, see, now I'm getting all little chills when I talk about this one, was the common area in rehab. They were watching television. They were flipping around the channels, and I was standing there, and they flipped to this channel, and I saw this man on the television talking about the family cycle and how you have to break the family cycle. Well, that in a second resonated with me. He was talking about how we learn what we live, and then we live what we learn. That made complete sense to me. And I immediately started thinking about all of the things in my own life, all of the beliefs and how I had gotten these from my family of origin. And it was that actually set me on the path to start to really notice my own belief system, my own thought processes, and then learn how to rewire those. I always called it how to be a real person training, because I had to go and relearn how to communicate. I had zero coping skills. I had no clue how to deal with good things that happened. I had no clue how to deal with adversity or bad things that happened. Feelings weren't allowed in my house. You didn't talk about feelings. So I had no clue how to process them, or even half the time what I was actually feeling. So it was seeing, and that man, by the way, was John Bradshaw, whom I'm sure a lot of viewers have heard about. We lost John a couple of years ago. But as soon as I got out of rehab, I had no money, but I took $11 and I went to the bookstore and I bought that book, and that set me on the path.
And that is an amazing story. Let's break for a commercial. All right. Now the commercial is, Susan, tell me about your new training program.
Oh, I like this commercial. That's cool. Okay. Well, WL, everyone always asks me, how did I get from there, the homeless kind of thing, to where I am today? So I did write a book, Confidence for Life, as you'd mentioned, but we're having a really tough year. This is COVID. A lot of people have lost their job or lost income. People are not feeling great about themselves. Everyone's struggling with their mental health. So I've created a challenge, a 30-day challenge, Confidence for Life, the 30-day challenge. And you get 4 videos a week for 4 weeks. And if you follow the videos and do the activities in the workbook, you will have a different perspective about yourself, about life, about what's possible for you in this life. And because it is COVID, because a lot of people are struggling, I am offering this for $97.
That is amazing, Susan. Hey, great commercial. You should go into writing commercials. I gave you a split second to think about doing a commercial. My point though is this: you struggled through. You did it the hard way.
Yeah, I did.
You had a defining moment that was basically just a passing thought, but you grabbed a hold of that. You built on that, you grew and continued. Okay. In my case, I said I was raised in an alcoholics home. My parents were divorced when I was 3. My mother was so bad the courts gave all the kids to my father.
Oh dear.
However, my mother kidnapped me or whatever. And so I was raised with my mother, and then subsequently she married a real alcoholic.
Oh boy.
And so this one was not a biological father, and so it was easy for me to be the punching bag then. But in my life, I had some people who came and picked me up, took me to Sunday school.
Right.
And in Sunday school, I learned about the love of God. I learned Bible passages, things like I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And so that positive input kicked out much of the negative. And that's how I went. Now, people today can watch or sign up for your program. Commercial number 2. I'm working on I'm working on a very similar program, and it's called 21 Days to Eden. But
Right.
it's the same thing. It's a step by step. This is how you can turn your life around. This is how you can reprogram your subconscious mind.
Yeah. And you can. We both know you can because we've both done it. And I don't know about you. I did it with no therapy. I mean, I felt so worthless that I didn't even feel worthy of going to a therapist. So I did it with a book, and that's what started me on the path. But we are both proof that your past does not have to define your future, but you do need to take responsibility for your own thoughts. No, you probably didn't plant them there, but they are now your thoughts. And we can choose to rewire those and believe a different thing. Just a quick tip, that confirmation bias that I talked about, we can flip that around to the positive as well. Because if we can have one positive belief about ourselves, about life, about what's possible in life, if we can hold that in our mind and then go through our day and look for proof that that is true, you'll feel better at the end of the day. It's just that simple. The challenge is continuing that day after day after day.
All right. Before we get to the continuance, let's go back to the rehab common area room.
Yeah.
And they're flipping through the channels. You get a glimmer of this guy talking on TV.
Yep.
Based on what you said, I'm going to say that it was that moment that a glimmer of hope took hold in your life.
Yes. It was an opening, if you will. It was an awakening. It was an awareness that, oh, hang on, wait a minute. That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And I have to learn more about that because this could answer exactly what's wrong with me and how I ended up with my life this way. It really was that moment of shining light. I spoke to John Bradshaw many times over the last few years. And the first time John and I spoke, I cried through the entire conversation because I told him, I said, you literally saved my life, because I honestly believe that without that moment of seeing him on television, that it started me down that journey. And I always say, John Bradshaw saved my life.
Okay. So then we move from hope. The next step is belief. And once we get the belief,
You're a
once we
popular
get the yeah, the spammers love me. But if I have some hope and I see the light at the end of the tunnel, I listen closely. I don't hear anything, so it's not a train coming. But if I can start building on that hope with a little bit of belief.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me give you another personal example, because we haven't talked for 7 years. You don't know that I ended up in a wheelchair with arthritis of my feet.
Oh, no.
Okay. So I'm doing research for my program, the 21 Days to Eden. I'm doing research on that. I'm reading all these books, and they're telling about all these marvelous things that have happened to people through reprogramming their subconscious mind or visualizing what they want to see in their life. I mean, it's things like people that were in accidents and broke their back and they healed themselves, people that had cancers, people that had fibromyalgia, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I'm reading all this, Susan. I'm laying there in bed one night, and I think to myself, no, wait a minute. just because you're 76 years old doesn't mean you have to suffer from arthritis in your feet. Susan, I woke up the next morning, the pain was gone. I sold my electric scooter. I'm giving away the walker, and I use the cane to move my blue screen back and forth when I'm recording a video. So completely church, and it was a moment of belief.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've believed in the power of prayer basically all my life since I was 9 years old. But this was something different. This was an explanation of what is in our body, what our body can do, what our subconscious mind can do. When I believed that, it happened.
Yeah. And to your point, we co-create. We do. We co-create with the creator, whatever you want to call that, God, the universe, whatever you call that. We co-create, but our brains are so powerful. Did you know that every emotion and every feeling comes with chemicals?
Yes.
So whenever we're having those emotions or those feelings, when we're feeling despair or we're lacking in hope or we're angry or frustrated, we're actually releasing chemicals into our system. And it's those chemicals that can get clogged up, things like joints, arteries, all of that. I always think about emotion and the power of emotion. And when emotion gets stuck in the body and what happens as a result of that.
Okay. So and I haven't read his book, I just read about his book, a gentleman that had an incurable disease, and he laughed his way to healing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let me go back to the Bible for a second. The Bible says a merry heart does good like a medicine. Okay. When we allow stress to come into our life, and who doesn't have stress?
Yeah, we all do.
Okay, that's the flight or fight mode that our brain goes into, and it secretes the adrenaline and the cortisol and a few other negative things. It shuts down the immune system, and then we wonder why we get sick and die prematurely when we allow stress to stay in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a lot of physicians and surgeons, and they will all tell you that a positive outlook is the best medicine for recovery from any illness.
Right. Okay. So I've kind of lost place of where we were.
That's what happens when we get chatting.
We're talking about your book and 9 secrets to set yourself free.
Yes.
So first thing is what? Let's go.
Well, in the book, again, it answers the question how I went from there to here. And the very first chapter is about the power of your brain, exactly what we're talking about, and that conditioning and how that conditioning happens and how it governs our life. And then I think probably the one secret for my success is recognizing this center of the universe phenomenon that we have as human beings, and that we all believe we're the center of the universe and that the world revolves around us.
Yeah.
And to recognize that, in fact, our beliefs, our view of the world, our view of what is right and wrong is just that, our view, and not necessarily true out there in reality. And when I understood that, so much stress fell away. Because, every time somebody looked at me or said something to me, I was quite sure that it was all about me, that I'd done something wrong, that I was horrible. It just fed that worthlessness. And when I understood that, no, wait a minute, that's not possible. Whatever they're saying is actually about them. They're telling me something about them because of this center of the universe. So it was a huge, huge thing for me in my freedom, if you will, to understand that. And then, of course, I talk about the power of the self-fulfilling prophecy. So conditioning, center of the universe orientation, we create these self-fulfilling prophecies. And I'll quote Henry Ford: whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way, you're correct.
That's right.
And then the remainder of the chapters in the book are all techniques for how to rewire your brain, how to develop self-esteem and confidence, and start to feel better about yourself and your life. And WL, you and I both know that when you change the inside, your outside world magically changes to reflect what's happening on the inside. So the more confidence you gain, the more self-esteem you gain, you find that your outside world will change to reflect that.
Okay, so which one do we want to talk about first? Stress is a big issue. You know, we're just, I almost said we're coming through COVID-19. I trust that we are. You know, they're making some progress. I think the biggest progress on the COVID-19 is that finding a vaccine is taking away some of the fear that people have.
Yeah.
And the fear is what's been driving the damage caused by COVID-19 more than COVID-19.
Agreed.
The fear, the panic, all of that was wreaking havoc in our lives, you know, from mental, financial, you know, people losing their jobs, companies closing down, all those things. And, you know, it's had, and I don't know how much of it really is responsible for this horrible election campaign that we went through. I as I said a little bit ago, I'm 76 years old. I've seen a lot. I've never seen anything so disturbing as the way we have fought each other, and the anger. And you talk about emotion, that has a tremendously negative impact on our lives. And so we have a whole nation full of anger.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we fix that?
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I travel, not obviously this year, but I live part-time in the UK, and I will tell you that the entire world was glued to CNN during that election process, that's for sure. But I worry about two things with this. So first of all, with the COVID-19 thing, I worry that we consume so much news and none of it's positive, right? It's all negative because, rescuing Fluffy from a tree doesn't really sell news programs. It doesn't cause people to watch. So they tend to hype on the negatives, and the deaths and all of that and what's happening. I worry that we consume so much news. We're so exposed to all this negativity that it's what we were talking about a little while ago. It can't help but have an effect on our view. And when we consume all this negativity, this doom and gloom, you don't run around really happy and, full of energy and want to do things. It kind of makes you go depressed. Right. It causes you to really, and when you're in that state, when you're worried, when you're stressed, right? When you're fearful of COVID-19, of your loved ones dying, of the damage that it can do. When you're fearful, all those chemicals are being released. And to your point earlier, it compromises your immune system. So it's like we're creating our own reality here and opening ourselves up to this virus because we're so afraid that our immune system is compromised from all of those negative chemicals. So I worry about that, and don't watch the news, but I think we need to limit our exposure to the negativity. The second thing I worry about.
Hold on just 1 second, Susan. I've quit watching the news.
Yeah, me too.
Now, I still get the news because I look at the news online, but it's a little easier for me to decide what I'm going to see. If I read the headline, maybe that's enough. But rather than watching the late night news, which I have done for decades. I mean, I watch the news. Who cares about the weather? I can't change the weather. I've never been into sports, so I don't care about the sport, but I watch that news. It's as you said, it's way too negative.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of going to bed with all of the, what was it, that old hee-haw show that was, how did that go? Gloom, despair, agony on me.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
So if you
Let's not sing it though.
if you feed your mind on that just before you go to bed, you're not going to have a very good day tomorrow.
No. And that's it, right? The power of attitude, the power of our outlook. And I think all of that news causes us to go through life fearfully, and then we're closed off to any of the good stuff that can come our way.
Okay, so tell me some more about the steps that you are explaining to people and that suggesting that people take to help them make the change. I started to say this a while ago. It's I'm having a hard time with this interview, Susan. I'll have to tell you why. I so much want to hear everything that you had to say, but I'm interrupting a lot. But the point is that you and I have a secret, and we need to tell people that secret. People need to get a little bit of hope to understand that they can overcome.
Yeah.
They can make their life different. And if we make our life different, if I can fix myself, okay, and that rubs off on my wife and my children and my neighbor, and you do the same in your neck of the woods, and we do that, and we begin to do it as a community, we're going to change our culture. We're going to move away from the doom, gloom, and agony on me.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that song in a long time. But you're right. I agree with you 100%. I think one of the best gifts that you can give children is to role model healthy confidence and self-esteem. Yes. Because it's what we said earlier, right? You learn what you live, and then you live what you learn. So if you've got a role model who has healthy confidence and self-esteem, you're going to learn that yourself. And then you're going to be able to live that. But I think if you ask for my big secret, the big secret would be to start to recognize, don't just think thoughts. Okay. One of the most frustrating things is when people say to me, I can't help it. That's the way I am.
Yes.
In my head, I'm thinking, so what? You're telling me you've been programmed by aliens? Because you can help it.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be the way you are. So I think the big secret is to identify those negative thought patterns and to really stop and say, okay, I believe that I'm worthless, that I'm not good enough. Well, wait a minute. Is that actually true? Because I will tell you it's not true. You might believe that, but that doesn't mean it's true out there in reality. So to catch yourself in those thoughts, I'm not good at anything. No, I somehow don't believe that that's true. So to catch yourself in those thoughts and then to change those thoughts. So if you really don't believe you're good at anything, go and ask the people closest to you what your greatest skills are. Yes. What are the 3 things that you're best at? Their answers may surprise you, but it will also give you a different view. And then you can choose. Do you like the misery of I'm worthless, I'm good at nothing? Or would you prefer to accept the fact that you are good at things? And, you know, I always say we need to update our opinion of ourselves because we can never see ourselves as other people see us. So it's a very powerful thing to go to the people you trust and say, you know, what are my best qualities? Right? Or, What's the thing that makes me a good friend or a good employee? You might be surprised at the answers, but more often than not, we actually need to believe the other person, not what goes on in our head, because we lie to ourselves all the time.
You want to have fun today,
Yes.
Susan? Everybody you see today or talk to, think about something really kind that you can say to them.
Yes.
Susan, I think you are a great public speaker.
Oh, well, thank you.
You've got a grasp on your topic. You are amazing. Okay, now we just did two things. You know all that.
Yeah.
You didn't need to hear it from me, but it still does something inside, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, guess what? It made me feel better too.
Well, good. I'm glad. But you know what, WL? You raise a really good point. If you talk to a neuroscientist, they will tell you that one of the quickest ways to feel better is to go and do something positive for someone else. Either give them a compliment, help them out, do a chore, but do something positive for somebody else. It makes you feel better. Any neuroscientist will tell you that. That's how powerful those brain chemicals are.
Yeah. So let's go around. Let's help people feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went in the convenience store. I don't remember now exactly what I was going after. Probably something very healthy, like a chocolate bar or something.
I won't tell.
Okay, it shows. and I said something. It was real simple, to the cashier about, oh, you have a nice smile, and she just lit up.
Yep.
Said, oh, you've made my day.
And I'll bet she wasn't lying either. I'll bet you really did make her day. We're bombarded with so much negative from our own brain and from outside that something as simple like that can actually turn somebody's day around and make them feel better about themselves and about life in general.
Okay. So, Susan, how much of our own self-reprogramming, how much of the fixing ourselves can be accomplished by helping someone else?
So helping someone else, again, from a neuroscience standpoint, it releases feel-good chemicals in your brain. So it's absolutely going to make you feel better. But there are still those habitual, that we started this interview talking about the subconscious, the habitual patterns that we have, whether that's patterns of behavior or thought patterns. Those habitual patterns are the ones that we need to really look at and really pick them apart. And you know what? It's great if you recognize where they come from, but it doesn't really matter. But you need to pick those apart and learn to start to reframe those and change those belief systems or those actions. That's the way to create new neural pathways. That's the way to create new habits. And the more you develop those new habits, the better you feel about yourself. And I promise, the better quality of life you're going to have. It's actually got nothing to do with anything or anybody out there. It has everything to do with what goes on in here. That's what we really need to work on.
Susan, I'm having some cards printed, and they are what I call conquer cards.
Yeah, I like it.
Every time you have a negative thought, I can't stop thinking about, for example, you got some greenery behind you. I can't say, all right, now don't look at that greenery, because that's all I'm going to see. However, if I can reach into my pocket or my purse and pull out a card that says whatever positive quote, whatever Bible passage, whatever you want, as some people call them affirmations.
Yeah.
If I can pull that out and read that and think about that, then I have overcome that negative thought that popped up.
Exactly.
Will that work?
Yes, it will. It will.
And what else will work?
Yeah. So your self-talk, what you say to yourself, believe it or not, has a massive impact on not only your emotional health, but your physical health. So I know it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. Every time you tell yourself how horrible you are, or how overweight you are, or, you know, how stupid you are, or whatever those things are that we say to ourselves, you're actually, again, releasing those chemicals, and you're causing your own stress. So you're doing damage to your system. So becoming aware of the negative self-talk and finding those positive phrases, even if you have to put them on a sticky note and put them on your bathroom mirror so you see them first thing in the morning. But remember to say those things to yourself, because all of the negative self-talk, it's like we put ourselves into a trance. You know, we tell ourselves so many times during the day, speaking of from my own experience, I told myself so many times during the day how worthless I was, that it was like I was entranced by this thought, you know, and every action, every behavior all came from this place of worthlessness, because we entrance ourselves with these. So find a quote that you love, or a positive saying that you love, and repeat that over and over again. Entrance yourself with that, not the negative.
Yes. Okay, so let's kind of recap here. You went from being homeless, abused, addicted, the property of a motorcycle gang, alcoholic. Did you do drugs?
Oh gosh. Yes, so, I did.
So you used to be kind of a mess.
I was that's a kind word for it. I was a train wreck. Yeah, it's beyond description. I was a train wreck. You know, my sister didn't speak to me for, God, I don't know how many years. She wanted nothing to do with me. I was such a train wreck. Yeah, it was horrible.
Okay, and you've turned it all around.
I have.
And you've written 2 books.
Yes.
And the second one, I haven't read it yet, but just talking about it here a little bit, I already like it. Confidence for Life, 9 Secrets for Setting Yourself Free.
Yes.
We need help. Individually, we need help.
We do.
And you're providing that help. And so that is an amazing transformation. You know, I don't have a picture of you, but I'm guessing that the picture of you when you finally started to turn yourself around probably wasn't this well-poised, nice looking lady.
No, WL, I think I weighed about 76 pounds, which is scary to think about. I was so malnourished and dehydrated and had so many medical problems. It wasn't funny. So no, this is a completely different person. But that's the whole point, right? That if you and I can do this with no help, you know, through reading, through doing programs, through working on ourselves, then that just proves that you don't have to be rich. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have access to a therapist. You know, we can do this for ourselves.
Okay, I think that's a great point. Let me add one other point that seems to be kind of out there. We haven't talked about it. Most of us are not willing to admit that we need help.
Yeah.
Most of us are not willing to say, yes, I have a lot of negative ideas. I have a lot of negative thoughts. I have a lot of bad thoughts about myself. We're so used to putting on the smiley face.
Yeah.
Well, how are you today? Oh, I'm great. There's no snow to shovel. I'm great.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a secret, shall I? That you're right. Most of us do not like to ask for help. We don't like to admit that we need help, but we always know that we need help. So we'll admit it to ourselves. We just won't admit it publicly. And you know what? That's all this requires. You don't have to run around telling people that there's something wrong with you, that you need help, that you think, you know, you need to rewire your brain. You can do it without ever letting anybody else know. This is something that you can do for yourself, because we all know when we need help. We know when we're stuck. We know when we've got a problem. So we don't have to actually go externally. We can start internally. And then as you feel better, as you get stronger, asking for help becomes a little bit easier. I'll tell you a funny story. My best friend always says to me, she said, when are you going to ask for help? Because, I'm guilty of this as well. When are you going to ask for help? I'm like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? She said, Sue, she said, you are the only person I know that could be standing in your house with your house burning down around you. And somebody would come along and said, oh, your house is on fire. Do you need help? And you would say, oh, no, I'm fine. Thank you. It's under control. So we're all the same. We're all the same in our feeling different. So you start with yourself. That's where you start.
And the nice part about it is, as you change yourself from the inside, you don't have to tell the world around you. No. They'll see it and they'll come to you and say, hey, how'd you do this?
Exactly. Yes.
And I think you said something about that was the motivation for writing your second book.
It was.
How did you do that? How did you move?
That's the only thing anybody ever wanted to know. How did you get from there to here? And so that's why I wrote the book, to describe, to provide the techniques, the things that I did that allowed me to rewire my brain and go from there to here. And it's really interesting, when I work with other people, a lot of times people will go up to them and say, you're different. What's happened? And then they'll say, well, I want what you have.
Right.
How did you do it?
Right. Susan, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been great fun. And please, let's not wait 7 years for our next time to get together.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. You've been listening to and watching Real Hope with W. Olaney. My guest today is none other than the great Susan Armstrong. And Susan, again, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, WL. And you're right. Let's do this sooner rather than later next time.